Hey everyone, today we're jumping into a topic that's honestly fundamental, not just for your NEET exams, but for understanding life on Earth. We're talking about biodiversity and conservation. And this is way more than just memorizing species names, it's about the very fabric that holds our world together.
You know, just for a second, picture this. An alien spaceship lands on Earth. What do you think would blow their minds the most? It wouldn't be our skyscrapers or our internet. It would be the absolutely unbelievable, staggering variety of life itself. This planet is just crawling with it, in every possible shape and size.
And to really get a sense of that, let's just throw some numbers out there. We're talking about over 20,000 different species of ants, another 20,000 or so species of orchids, and then you get to beetles, and the number is just, well, it's a mind-boggling 300,000 known species. That incredible variety, that's what we mean by biodiversity.
Okay, so that brings us to Act 1. Let's build our foundation here and get really clear on the central question. What exactly is biodiversity? This is a core concept you've got to have locked down.
Now, here's the official, formal definition right from the Convention on Biological Diversity. And what's key here is the word variability. It's not just about counting animals, it's about the variation at every single level, from genes to species to entire ecosystems, whether they're on land, in the ocean, or anywhere else.
So, to really understand that variability, we break it down into 3 main levels. And for your exams, you absolutely have to know these 3. We've got genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecological diversity. Think of them as zooming out, from the smallest scale to the biggest.
So first up is genetic diversity. This is all the variation happening inside a single species. A perfect example, in India alone, we have over 50,000 genetically different strains of rice. It's that huge gene pool that lets a species survive and adapt. Then you zoom out one level to species diversity. This is where we compare the variety of species in one place versus another, like how the Western Ghats have a much greater diversity of amphibian species than the Eastern Ghats.
And finally, we zoom all the way out to ecological diversity. This is the big picture, the variety of entire ecosystems. And India is an incredible showcase for this. We've got everything: deserts, lush rainforests, tangled mangroves, vibrant coral reefs, wetlands, even alpine meadows high in the mountains. And of course, a huge variety of ecosystems means you can support a huge variety of species.
All right, that leads us straight into Act 2. We've defined what biodiversity is, but the real question is, so what? Why should we care? Why does all this variety actually matter so much?
Well, when we talk about conservation, the reasons usually fall into 3 main buckets. You've got the narrowly utilitarian arguments. These are the direct benefits we can basically put a price on. Then there's the broadly utilitarian, which are the huge essential services that ecosystems provide for free. And finally, the ethical argument, which is all about our moral responsibility.
And this right here is a perfect example of that narrowly utilitarian argument. Nature is, quite literally, a medicine cabinet. We get quinine from the cinchona tree to treat malaria, digoxin from the foxglove plant for heart problems, and incredibly powerful anti-cancer drugs like vinblastine and Taxol come from the periwinkle and yew tree. These are direct, life-saving products we get straight from nature.
Now, let's look at the broadly utilitarian argument. We're not talking about a single product here. We're talking about a service the entire planet depends on. The Amazon rainforest, often called the lungs of the planet, is cranking out an estimated 20% of all the oxygen in our atmosphere. You can't put a price tag on that. That's an ecosystem service on a scale that is almost impossible to comprehend.
And then we have the ethical argument. This one doesn't rely on what nature can do for us. It's the simple but profound idea that every species has intrinsic value, a right to exist, just like we do. It says we have a moral obligation to be good stewards of this planet and pass on this incredible biological inheritance to the generations that come after us.
And that brings us, unfortunately, to Act 3, the gathering storm. Because here's the central conflict of our story. We know how priceless this diversity is, yet we are losing it at a rate that is frankly terrifying.
Just let this number sink in for a moment. The great ecologist E.O. Wilson estimated that we are losing somewhere around 10,000 species every single year. That breaks down to about 27 species vanishing from the Earth forever every single day. The current rate of extinction is 100 to 1,000 times faster than what it would naturally be without human impact.
So what's causing this disaster? Ecologists have a nickname for the 4 main drivers:
And it's a term you definitely need to know for your exams: the evil quartet. Now, all four are bad news, but let's just focus on the two biggest culprits that are really pushing this crisis into overdrive.
The number one cause, and it's not even close, is habitat loss and fragmentation. Just think about tropical rainforests, these treasure troves of life. They used to cover 14% of the Earth's land surface. Today, it's down to just 6%. When huge areas of the Amazon are cleared for things like growing soy or raising cattle, the habitat isn't just destroyed, it's also fragmented. It creates these little isolated islands of forest, where animal populations can't reach each other, which leads to inbreeding and eventually extinction.
The second major driver is the invasion of alien species. See, when you introduce a species to a new place where it has no natural predators, it can just run wild. The textbook cautionary tale is the introduction of the Nile perch into Lake Victoria in East Africa. This huge predatory fish just decimated the local ecosystem, and in the process, it drove more than 200 native species of cichlid fish to extinction. Just gone. A total ecological catastrophe.
Okay, so that's the problem. It's a huge one. So now we get to Act 4, the Global Rescue Mission. This is all about the solutions. How do we actually fight back and conserve what we have left?
Broadly speaking, all our conservation strategies fall into two main camps, and you've got to know the difference. First, you have in-situ conservation. Think in-situation. We're protecting species right there, on site, in their natural habitat. A national park is a perfect example. The other approach is ex-situ conservation. Think exit. This is when we have to take a species off-site, outside of its natural home, to protect it. A zoo is a classic example. So let's look at both.
First up, let's talk about in-situ conservation, protecting life right where it belongs.
One of the most important in-situ strategies is to identify biodiversity hotspots. Now, what are these? They're regions that have two things: a ton of different species and a high number of endemic species, meaning species that are found there and absolutely nowhere else on Earth. And get this, India is home to parts of 3 of the world's 36 hotspots: the Western Ghats, the Indo-Burma region, and the Himalayas. That makes our conservation efforts incredibly important on a global scale.
And India has really put this strategy into action. We've created this huge network of protected areas. This includes massive biosphere reserves, where people and nature can coexist sustainably, super strict national parks, where human interference is basically zero, and hundreds of wildlife sanctuaries that often focus on protecting one specific threatened species. It's a multi-layered approach to protecting habitats.
Okay, now let's flip to the other side of the coin: ex-situ conservation. Think of ex-situ methods as a sort of emergency room or a life support system for biodiversity. This includes the obvious ones like zoos and botanical gardens, which are now critical centers for captive breeding programs. But it also includes amazing, high-tech options like gene banks and seed banks, which are like a Noah's Ark for genetic material. And then there's the really futuristic stuff, like cryopreservation.
And this is just incredible. With cryopreservation, we can take the gametes, the sperm and eggs, of critically endangered species and freeze them in liquid nitrogen at a mind-numbingly cold -196°C. At that temperature, they can be kept viable for decades, maybe even centuries. It's the ultimate insurance policy against a species disappearing forever.
So to wrap all of this up, let's come back to a really important question. Why does losing even one species matter? There's a brilliant analogy for this developed by Stanford ecologist Paul Ehrlich called the rivet popper hypothesis. He said to think of an ecosystem as an airplane, and every species is like a single rivet holding the plane together. If you're on a flight and you see someone pop one little rivet from a seat, the plane will probably be fine. Pop a few more, maybe still okay. But what happens if you pop too many? Or what if you happen to pop that one critical rivet that's holding the wing on? The whole thing comes crashing down.
And that really is the ultimate question, isn't it? Right now, on our planetary airplane, we are actively popping rivets. We're losing 27 of them every single day. The problem is, we have no idea which one is holding the wing on. We don't know which species, which rivet, is the one that when it's gone will cause the whole system to collapse. So the final question we have to ask ourselves is that really a risk we're willing to take?